Many people continue to think about that fateful day in Dallas, wanting to uncover the conspiracy confirmed by the government decades ago.
And over the 60 years, we have had revelations after revelation. But people don't really understand how it works in the aggregate. And so I decided, I've been studying this for forever. I've been to Dealey Plaza many times. I've talked to everybody who was alive at the time. I've talked to forensic experts. I've talked to everybody. I decided to see if we could put together in a comprehensive, deep dive as to what actually happened that day with the best information that we have at this point and put it all together.
For 6 decades, speculation, theories, and controversy have swirled around the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. Who really pulled the strings? Was it a lone gunman or something far more sinister? It was November 22nd, 1963. One shot, one moment, and the world was never the same. And now, legendary filmmaker Rob Reiner claims to have unearthed the truth behind one of history's greatest mysteries. In his explosive 10-part podcast, Who Killed JFK, co-hosted by acclaimed journalist Soledad O'Brien, Reiner promises to expose the individuals he believes orchestrated the assassination. Names that could rewrite everything we thought we knew about this tragic chapter in our history. Is this the final piece of the puzzle, or just another chapter in the endless web of conspiracy? Stay tuned. Rob Reiner's lifelong quest for the truth behind JFK's assassination. The autumn of 1963 was supposed to be just another season, another chapter in the life of 16-year-old Rob Reiner. But in a single instant, the course of history changed, both for the nation and for him. What began as an ordinary school day turned into a moment that would haunt him for decades, igniting an obsession that would span a lifetime. According to the filmmaker, he remembers the events vividly like it was yesterday. That fateful day, the hum of classroom chatter faded into an eerie silence. A messenger entered, whispered something to the teacher, and suddenly, everything shifted. Faces grew pale. Breaths were held. Then the announcement came. The President of the United States had been shot in Dallas. Confusion quickly turned to fear, fear to grief. Classes were dismissed and students flooded into the streets, uncertain of what they had just heard, struggling to process the weight of the words that had just altered the trajectory of their country. In an interview, Rob Reiner recalled how he heard the news of JFK's assassination. He said, "Well, it was a national trauma. Anybody who was alive at the time can remember exactly where they were when they heard the news. And I was in high school. I was in my physics class. A student walked in, whispered into the teacher's ear. He turned to us and said, 'I have some terrible, terrible news,' told us what had happened. Everybody was sent home, and then we watched nonstop from that moment till the moment where I saw on live television the man who was accused of killing President Kennedy." Reiner, like millions of Americans, rushed home, his mind racing. When he turned on the television, the black and white screen flickered with images of chaos. News anchors barely able to contain their shock, reporters scrambling to piece together the story, a nation collectively holding its breath. And then, the confirmation. President John F. Kennedy was dead. The world as they knew it had changed forever. But the days that followed were even more surreal. The tragedy took a darker turn, unfolding like a political thriller too twisted to be real. Just as the public began grappling with the name Lee Harvey Oswald, the man accused of assassinating the president, another shocking event played out in real time. Before a stunned nation, Oswald himself was killed, gunned down on live television by nightclub owner Jack Ruby. Millions watched in horror as a key figure in the investigation was silenced in an instant. Questions that had barely begun to form were suddenly swallowed by an even deeper mystery. For most, the story ended there, left to speculation and the endless echoes of conspiracy. But for Rob Reiner, it was only the beginning. The image of those events burned into his memory, fueling a relentless need to understand what had really happened that day. As he grew older, his curiosity hardened into determination, transforming him from a witness to an investigator. Over the years, he returned to Dealey Plaza time and time again, He didn't just stand on the infamous grassy knoll. He studied it, walked its paths, traced the angles from which the fatal shots were fired. He positioned himself exactly where Abraham Zapruder had stood, capturing the moment in his legendary film. The plaza, once just a site of tragedy, became something more, a living, breathing classroom where Reiner meticulously dissected every detail, every inconsistency, every piece of the puzzle that still didn't fit. Decades later, after years of research, speculation, and unanswered questions, Reiner was ready to share what he had discovered. In his gripping 10-part podcast, Who Killed JFK, he set out to do what few had dared, to name the 4 individuals he believed were truly responsible for the assassination of President Kennedy. Was he finally unveiling the truth that had been buried for 6 decades? Or was this just another piece in the ever-expanding web of mystery and deception? One thing is certain. Rob Reiner's journey had led him deeper into the shadows of history than most had ever dared to go. Rob Reiner's fascination of JFK's assassination. What began as a young man's desperate search for understanding in the wake of a national tragedy soon transformed into something far greater, a lifelong pursuit of truth that would challenge the very foundations of history. The echoes of that fateful day in 1963, burned into Rob Reiner's memory as a teenager, never faded. Instead, they deepened with time, evolving from a haunting recollection into the catalyst for a relentless 6-decade investigation. And over the 60 years, we have had revelations after revelation, but people don't really understand how it works in the aggregate. So I decided, I've been studying this forever. I've been to Dealey Plaza many times. I've talked to everybody who was alive at the time. I've talked to forensic experts. I've talked to everybody. I decided to see if we could put together a comprehensive deep dive into what actually happened that day with the best information that we have at this point and put it all together. And we do eventually tell you what we think happened. To Reiner, it felt more like the plot of a dark political thriller than reality. But this was real, and it was far from over. As the years passed, the teenage witness to history became a man unwilling to accept the official version of events at face value. The questions that had first formed in his mind as a boy only grew louder, more insistent, refusing to be silenced. With time, his role shifted from that of an observer to an investigator, and as a respected filmmaker, Reiner possessed a unique advantage. He could bring together experts, historians, and researchers to piece together a more complete picture of what had really happened that day in Dallas. His ability to blend personal experience with historical inquiry allowed him to bridge the gap between memory and evidence, emotion and fact. This combination of personal investment and professional capability eventually led him to an extraordinary collaboration with award-winning journalist Soledad O'Brien. Together they set out to do what few had dared, to confront the mysteries that had shrouded the assassination for 6 decades. Their work culminated in a groundbreaking 10-part podcast series, Who Killed JFK, a project that promised to reveal the full, unfiltered truth behind the events of November 22, 1963. But for Reiner, this was never just a project. It was a mission. The weight of that high school day never loosened its grip on him. It had driven him forward for 60 years, compelling him to challenge the narrative the world had been told, to dig deeper than ever before, to follow the evidence wherever it led, no matter how unsettling the truth might be. And now, after decades of searching, he was ready to reveal what he had uncovered. He was ready to name the 4 individuals he believed were truly responsible for the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. Is this the moment history would finally be rewritten? Rob Reiner's 60-year journey to the truth. For decades, the world was led to believe a single narrative, that a lone gunman, acting without aid or influence, altered the course of American history with 3 bullets fired from the Texas School Book Depository. But what if that story was nothing more than a carefully constructed illusion? What if the truth, a sinister and far-reaching conspiracy, had been buried beneath layers of deception, official denials, and a masterfully orchestrated cover-up? Renowned filmmaker and lifelong investigator Rob Reiner has spent nearly 6 decades uncovering what he believes is the real story behind the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. What began as a moment of teenage shock and confusion in 1963 evolved into an obsessive search for answers, one that would take him deep into the murky world of espionage, political betrayal, and organized crime. Through his exhaustive research, Reiner has uncovered a conspiracy far more intricate and insidious than the lone gunman theory that has dominated official narratives for generations. His findings, revealed in his gripping 10-part podcast series, expose a tangled web of covert alliances, linking rogue elements within the CIA, radical members of the Cuban exile community, and high-ranking figures in the world of organized crime. The sinister alliance that led to JFK's assassination. History has long suggested that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone, but Reiner's investigation dismantles this assumption. Instead, it reveals a shocking collaboration between 3 powerful factions, groups that, on the surface, seem disconnected, yet were bound by a shared objective. First, there were rogue elements within the CIA, men who had grown increasingly disillusioned with Kennedy's leadership, particularly after the failed Bay of Pigs invasion and his push for peace with the Soviet Union. To them, JFK was a liability, a leader whose policies threatened the intelligence community's long-standing operations in Cuba and beyond. Then, there were members of the Cuban exile community, fiercely opposed to Kennedy's perceived betrayal of their cause. Many of these exiles had been trained and armed by the CIA for covert missions against Fidel Castro's regime. When Kennedy began signaling a shift away from aggressive intervention in Cuba, these operatives felt abandoned, their dreams of reclaiming their homeland crushed. Revenge against the president became, in their eyes, a righteous cause. Finally, there was the hand of organized crime. The mob had a deep and bitter grudge against Kennedy and his administration. Under Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy, a relentless crackdown on organized crime was underway, threatening powerful crime syndicates that had once enjoyed protection from corrupt politicians. The mafia had worked behind the scenes to help JFK secure the presidency, and now they felt betrayed. Silencing him permanently would serve their interests in more ways than one. These 3 groups, operating independently yet sharing a common enemy, formed an unholy alliance, working together in the shadows to orchestrate one of the most shocking political assassinations in history. Rob Reiner's own theory about JFK's assassination. For years, conspiracy theorists have focused their attention on the infamous grassy knoll, believing it to be the key to the mystery. But Reiner's research suggests an even more complex and chilling reality, one that involved multiple shooting positions, carefully selected vantage points, and a level of coordination far beyond what a lone gunman could achieve. The grassy knoll did, in fact, conceal one of the shooters. Ballistic evidence suggests that a shot fired from this position struck Kennedy in the neck, but the fatal bullet, the one that ended the president's life, came from elsewhere, likely from a second shooter positioned at a completely different angle. According to Reiner, the resulting crossfire created confusion that made it nearly impossible for investigators to determine the true sequence of events. Reiner's findings, backed by forensic analysis and eyewitness testimonies, challenge the very foundation of what the world has long accepted as fact. The precision with which the ambush was executed suggests military-style planning, a carefully choreographed assault that left nothing to chance. This was not the reckless act of a single man. It was a calculated execution, orchestrated with chilling efficiency. Was JFK's assassination a cover-up? According to Reiner, the assassination itself was only the first phase of the operation. What followed, according to him, was an equally elaborate cover-up, one designed not just to mislead the public, but to cement the lone gunman narrative so deeply that it would be nearly impossible to challenge. Key witnesses were silenced or discredited. Alleged evidence that contradicted the official story mysteriously disappeared. Autopsy reports were allegedly altered, and conflicting testimonies were reportedly suppressed. The Warren Commission, tasked with investigating JFK's assassination, relied on a carefully curated selection of evidence, allegedly ignoring crucial details that pointed to a broader conspiracy. Even the shocking murder of Lee Harvey Oswald, who was gunned down on live television by nightclub owner Jack Ruby, played into the hands of those who wanted the truth buried forever. Reiner claimed that Oswald's death ensured that he would never speak, never reveal whether he'd been set up as the perfect patsy. Reiner's investigation exposes the machinery behind this cover-up, revealing how the forces that orchestrated Kennedy's assassination also controlled the narrative in its aftermath. The level of coordination extended far beyond the crime scene, reaching into media, law enforcement, and government institutions. Reiner believes that the official story was not simply a mistake. It was a deliberate deception, designed to protect those truly responsible. Reiner revealed to CNN that the House Select Committee many years later, over 10 years later, was also compromised. They came to a different conclusion. They said it was a conspiracy. The Warren Commission said Oswald acted alone. You have two government official records saying the exact opposite, but they were both compromised because they were CIA agents in charge of the gatekeeper of information. 6 decades of lie about what truly happened to JFK. For 60 years, the world has been fed a story that, according to Reiner, was never meant to be questioned. But now, the veil is being lifted. Through his podcast series, Reiner promises to name the key players, exposing the identities of those who converged on Dallas that fateful day. These individuals, figures with ties to intelligence agencies, the underworld, and political operatives, did not act alone. They moved with precision, carrying out a mission so flawlessly executed that it took decades for the pieces to finally fall into place. What emerges from this investigation is more than just a conspiracy theory. It is a dark and unsettling truth that has remained hidden in plain sight. The forces behind this assassination were not acting on impulse. They had a motive, a plan, and a level of influence that allowed them to manipulate history itself. Now, at long last, their secrets are being brought to light. Reiner asserts that the assassination of John F. Kennedy was not the act of a lone madman. It was a coup, a carefully executed removal of a leader who had become a threat to those operating behind the scenes. And the echoes of that fateful day in November 1963 continue to reverberate through history, shaping the world in ways we are only now beginning to understand. For decades, the official story remained unchanged. One lone gunman, 3 shots from the Texas school book depository, and the tragic death of a beloved president. But beneath the surface of this carefully crafted narrative lay disturbing inconsistencies, conflicting testimonies, and evidence that never quite fit. Now, after years of exhaustive research, newly uncovered documents, forensic breakthroughs, and eyewitness accounts are finally shattering the long-standing illusion. One of the most damning revelations comes from the very people who fought to save President Kennedy's life, the doctors at Parkland Hospital. These seasoned medical professionals, each with extensive trauma experience, were the first to examine Kennedy's wounds. In a recent documentary, they spoke with a chilling unanimity. Every single wound they saw on the president's body had the characteristics of an entrance wound. If their assessment is correct, it upends the foundation of the Warren Commission's findings. The implication is as shocking as it is undeniable. If all of Kennedy's wounds were caused by bullets entering his body, then the shots could not have come from behind, where Oswald was supposedly positioned. This single fact calls into question everything the public has been led to believe. If the official account is false, then who was truly responsible? The deeper the investigation goes, the more unsettling the answers become. 2 notorious figures were present during JFK's assassination. For decades, whispers of covert operatives and criminal underworld figures lurking in the shadows of Dealey Plaza have been dismissed as conspiracy theories. But now, buried testimony from a former CIA asset has emerged, shedding new light on the true nature of what happened that day. According to this first-hand account, uncovered after decades of secrecy. Two notorious individuals, Johnny Roselli and E. Howard Hunt, were transported to Dallas on November 22, 1963. Roselli, a known mafia figure deeply entrenched in both organized crime and CIA covert operations, had long been rumored to have played a role in the assassination. Hunt, a high-ranking CIA operative with extensive experience in black ops, was a key player in some of the most controversial events in U.S. history. Their confirmed presence in Dallas on the day of Kennedy's murder is not just a coincidence. It is the missing link that ties intelligence agencies, organized crime, and covert operations into a single deadly conspiracy. The level of detail in the asset's account is staggering. His testimony aligns perfectly with newly declassified CIA documents, establishing a timeline of movements that match independently verified events from that fateful day. Were these men not mere spectators? Were they part of something larger, something orchestrated, something deliberate? If there was any lingering doubt about Oswald's role in the assassination, thousands of newly declassified CIA files obliterate the official story. Far from being a lone, disillusioned gunman with no meaningful connections, these documents expose Oswald's deep entanglement with intelligence agencies, an involvement that stretched back years before the assassination. The said files reveal repeated interactions between Oswald and key intelligence operatives, suggesting he was far more than a simple ex-Marine turned assassin. Instead, the evidence paints a picture of a man embedded within an intricate web of espionage, covert operations, and intelligence maneuvering. But was Oswald a willing participant in the conspiracy, or was he a carefully chosen scapegoat, one whose purpose was to absorb the blame while the real masterminds disappeared into the shadows? These questions, long ignored or suppressed by official investigations, are finally being confronted. The pieces of the puzzle, scattered for decades, are now falling into place. And what they reveal is more disturbing than anyone could have imagined. Forensic breakthrough sheds light to the truth of JFK's assassination. With the advancements of modern forensic technology, long-lost details from Dealey Plaza are coming into focus for the first time. Newly enhanced photographs and films from that day, once grainy and inconclusive, have undergone meticulous digital restoration. What these enhanced images reveal is nothing short of shocking. Figures that were once indistinct become identifiable. Shadows that once seemed unremarkable now tell a different story. The movements of key individuals before, during, and after the shooting take on new significance. Forensic ballistic analysis confirms what eyewitnesses had long suspected. Kennedy was caught in a meticulously executed crossfire. The multiple shooter scenario, long dismissed as a fringe theory, is now backed by a mountain of evidence. The ballistic patterns, the medical findings, the eyewitness statements, all converge to expose the grim reality. The president's assassination was not the work of a single deranged gunman. It was a coordinated effort, executed with precision, involving multiple vantage points and a network of conspirators operating under the cover of deception. The final haunting question remains: why was the truth buried for so long? The answer lies in the intricate cover-up that followed the assassination. A carefully constructed web of misinformation, fabricated reports, and official denials ensured that the real perpetrators remained in the shadows. From the suppression of critical evidence to the intimidation of witnesses, the machinery of secrecy was in full force. Documents were classified, testimonies were altered, and inconvenient facts were buried. The public was fed a sanitized version of events, one designed to quash any suspicion, to prevent further inquiry, to ensure that the real story would never come to light. But now, after decades of relentless investigation, the truth is finally emerging. The conspiracy was real. The evidence is undeniable. And the cover-up, meticulously orchestrated, is collapsing under the weight of its own lies. What was once dismissed as a wild conspiracy theory is now an undeniable reality. The assassination of John F. Kennedy was not the act of a lone madman, but a sophisticated, multi-layered operation involving powerful forces with motives that have remained hidden. Until now. As the truth finally comes into focus, one thing is certain. History must be rewritten. The American people deserve to know what really happened that day in Dallas. And for the first time in 60 years, with the help of Rob Reiner, the full story is finally coming to light. Conclusion of Rob Reiner's investigation. The cover-up that followed Kennedy's assassination stands as one of the most chilling aspects of Reiner's investigation. In the immediate aftermath of the shooting, a calculated effort was set in motion, one designed not to uncover the truth, but to bury it. Powerful figures across multiple government agencies moved swiftly, ensuring that a single, carefully crafted narrative took hold. The manipulation began at Parkland Hospital, where doctors who had fought to save the president's life were pressured to alter their initial reports about the nature of his wounds. But the deception did not end there. Evidence was tampered with, key witness testimonies were either distorted or erased entirely, and official records were manipulated to support a predetermined conclusion. The Warren Commission, presented to the public as a beacon of truth, instead became a tool of deception, carefully steering the nation away from the real story. Perhaps the most damning revelation comes from the role of the FBI. Under the iron-fisted leadership of J. Edgar Hoover, the Bureau worked aggressively to silence dissenting voices, dismissing or discrediting anyone whose account threatened to expose the truth. Now, as new evidence emerges and long-buried secrets come to light, one question remains. Will Reiner's long-awaited revelation of the four assassins finally shatter the decades-old facade and bring long-overdue justice? The truth is closer than ever. But will the world be ready to hear it? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and please hit the thumbs up if you enjoyed this story. Stay tuned to more videos like this one by clicking the subscribe button and notification bell. See you in the next video.